By what name are you known?
There are some who call me Tim.
Welcome to another episode of Timmy Talks, the channel where we talk old school magic. And welcome back at the Raging Bull series. We have reached round number 3 of this exciting old school magic tournament that was held in Amsterdam, the Netherlands. And we're going to look at Leo, who is on robots, and he's going to play against Frenk, who's on a Chains of Mephistopheles deck. Yes, the Chains deck. Change. I'm saying change, but I mean chains. English is a hard language. Now, I'm very excited because this is the first time on the channel that we're going to look at the Chains of Mephistopheles, that we're going to try to dissect this card, understand this card, and see the card in action. So I'm really looking forward to it. So thank you, Frenk, for bringing this interesting deck to the table. And he's playing against a mighty strong deck, Robots by Leo Bruder. It is brutal. It's a brutal deck. We're also going to look at that deck, but before we start with the decks, as always, I'd like to mention a few things. First off, if you want to know what the specific rule sets are of this tournament, please check the description below for all the ins and outs, and a link to the Raging Bull series website as well, by the way, because there's a website with a lot of interesting content on there, so go and check it out. And furthermore, if you want to skip the deck, maybe you want to check it out after the match, absolutely possible. In that case, please check the timestamps below. One of those timestamps reads MTG Games. Click on there and that will take you straight to the action. And as for now, we are going to start with the deck. I'm actually going to start with the deck of Frenk because I just really want to try to understand the Chains of Mephistopheles, and I want to try and explain it to you. So this is this is quite a challenge. Let's get going. And here we see the deck of Frenk with that really cool card, Chains of Mephistopheles. I think I've already mispronounced it in the introduction. Doesn't matter. I'm just going to call it the Chains from now on. And it's such a cool card. 1 black and 1 to cast for this enchantment from Legends that read, I'm just going to read the current Oracle text. It reads, if a player would draw a card except the first one they draw in each of their draw steps, that player discards a card instead. If the player discards a card this way, they draw a card. If the player doesn't discard a card this way, they mill a card. So I can imagine if you're listening to this, you're like, what is he saying? Well, I found this online, this flow chart, and this flow chart is going to help us to understand this card. So what happens is, if you draw a card, first you have to ask yourself, is it your draw step? Now, if it's your draw step, you can just draw the card. Nothing else happens. So you can still draw your first card for turn, untap, upkeep, draw, nothing changes. It gets fishy when you are forced to draw extra cards, or when you yourself want to draw an extra card. Let's just say that you have a Jam Day Tome on the battlefield and you're activating your Jam Day Tome and you want to draw an extra card. Then it says, is it your draw step? Let's go into the flowchart, right? Is it your draw step? It's not my draw step. Do you have any cards in hand? Let's say, yeah, I've got 7 cards in hand and I'm now drawing card number 8. If that answer is yes, then it says instead of drawing that card, you first discard a card. So you go from 7 cards to 6 cards in hand, and then you draw that card. Right? So that means you don't gain any extra cards. Your card amount that you have in hand kind of stays the same. Get it? Now, if you have no cards in hand, you actually have to mill yourself. So if you draw the extra card with 0 cards in hand, you're basically milling yourself for 1. So instead of drawing that card, you've got to put the top card of your library into your graveyard. Now, this is where it gets interesting when we look at the rest of the deck of Frenk. He's playing with Winds of Change. Now, Winds of Change is 1 red that says, put all the cards in your hand, shuffle them back into your library, then draw that many cards. And it goes for both players. So if you have, let's say, 6 cards in hand, you've got to shuffle those 6 cards back into your library. Then you have no cards in hand, and then you've got to draw 6. But when the Chains is on the battlefield, right, it says, is it your draw step? Well, no, it's not my draw step. I mean, he just played Winds of Change, and I have to do this. So you want to draw the 6 cards, but the enchantment says, oh, no, you're not. Instead of drawing the card, you first have to discard a card. But you say, yeah, but I've got no cards in hand. I just shuffled my whole hand back into my library. Well, in that case, dear sir, I'm very unfortunate. It is very unfortunate, but I have to tell you that you now have to discard 6 times instead of draw 6 cards. Because for each time you would draw a card, you've got to mill yourself, right? So you're going to mill yourself for 6. So, I mean, basically what it means is that when you have the Chains of Mephistopheles in play, right, your Winds of Change is now turned in a brutal discard spell, right? And that is just amazingly powerful. And of course, this works together really well with the wreck, right? So what Frenk wants to do, wants to use his chains to make sure that you cannot draw any extra cards that in combination with the Winds of Change, you're going to lose your entire hand. And then he has the wreck, and the wreck punishes you for not having any cards in hand. Because what it does is it says at the beginning of the chosen player's upkeep, which will probably be your opponent, the wreck deals X damage to that player, where X is 3 minus the number of cards in their hand. So if your opponent now has 0 cards in their hands after successfully playing the Winds of Change, the wreck is going to start dealing damage to the opponent. So the wreck is really the way towards victory for Frenk. That's the thing that's actually going to deal some damage. Now, to make sure that he doesn't die too quickly, he's kind of put that, pink weenie control shell. So he's playing Swords to Plowshares, Disenchant Balance. He's playing 4 Lightning Bolts. He's playing a Fireball. So he's kind of has that in place to, to save him, to give him the time to get his combo set up and to start hurting his opponent with Chains of Mephistopheles. He's also playing with the Abyss, of course, which goes great in his creatureless deck. But wait a minute. He also has a transformational sideboard. Look at the sideboard. I mean, Frenk, you've got so many tricks, man. He's playing 15 creatures in his sideboard, so he can turn it completely into pink weenie after the first game. So if he feels that he's given too much information to his opponent, he can change his strategy completely. So, I mean, this is so interesting, Frenk, and I really hope that we're going to see your deck working on full cylinders. This doesn't always happen, but I really, really do hope so. Just a little spoiler alert here. If you're thinking about building a Chains of Mephistopheles deck yourself as well, it is super costly. So it's one of those cards, if you have it, super cool to go and build a deck. If you don't have it, you're probably not gonna own it anytime soon. It's ridiculously expensive. The same thing kind of goes for Nethervoid, another really cool enchantment from Legends. Also black, by the way. And it's just one of these cards, super cool to build around, but they're just so expensive just to, kind of brew for fun with. Anyway, this is the deck of Frenk. Now let's take a look at the deck of his opponent, Leo. And here we see the robots deck of Leo. And the cool thing is that the first time I saw somebody playing robots like this was actually Leo. It was at the Fish Liver Oil Cup in Genoa in Italy. And this was pre-COVID. So I think it was 3 or 4 years ago. But it was really exciting to see this deck in action. For me, it was brand new at the time. Now, of course, we know this as one of the top tier decks. I believe, Leo, you reached the finals that year of that tournament in Genoa, and that's quite an accomplishment because there's so many good old school players there. When we're looking at this list, what you want to do with robots basically is you want to get your Moxen out, your Mana Volts out as fast as you can to cast your Triskelion. Triskelion is really the MVP of the deck. It's a 60 cast for this 1/1 creature with, that comes into play with 3 +1/+1 counters. So it's basically your 4/4. You can take those counters off anytime you want to deal 1 damage. Now this may not sound very impressive, but it actually really is. So if you can get a Trike out in turn 2 or turn 3, you can then start playing copy artifacts to copy it. If the Trike dies, he can use his Animate Dead to get it back from the graveyard, and he's got even more damage. And you know what? If he doesn't draw that, then maybe he can just play a Suchi, 4 mana for a 4/4. Now that's very good value, very good bang for your buck, as they say. And then, of course, you can start copying those as well. Copy Artifact, a very, very important card in this deck. 1 blue and 1 for an enchantment that allows you to copy any artifact in play. So it's actually super good. Another card I want to highlight in here is a card that I don't think it's underestimated anymore, but it used to be Sage of Latnam, 1 blue and 1 to cast for a 1/2 creature. You can tap it to sack an artifact to draw a card. Now, the cool thing about this is you can use it at instant speed. So, for example, if Frenk is playing with Disenchants, if Frenk is trying to disenchant the Suchi, in response, Leo can say, okay, I'm going to tap my Sage, sack the Suchi to draw a card. So he gets a card back for that Suchi, giving him card advantage. So if you have a Lightning Bolt, point them towards those Sages of Latnam because they are more powerful than you think. And of course, with the deck at this level, this power level, we see all those powerful blue cards, right? Ancestral Recall, Time Walk, Time Twister, they're all in here. We also see Mind Twist and Demonic Tutor, those very yucky and very powerful black cards. We also see the Mana Drain in here. And of course, we see all the Moxen because those Moxen are going to help accelerate the deck of Leo. And because of all the Moxen, it also makes that 1 red card pretty good in his deck, the Atok, because there's 1 single Atok in here. I kind of like that as an kind of an alternative win con that comes out of nowhere. What I also like is that 1 Fireball, because Fireball and Suchi, again, is synergy that goes together very well. He can use the Sage in his main phase to sack the Suchi. Then he gets 4 mana from the Suchi, and that can kind of help him to build a bigger Fireball and maybe finish his opponent with a Fireball. So there are more ways that lead to Rome for Leo. You know, as they say, there are more ways that he can win a game, but I think the main game phase of the Robots deck has always been Triskelion, copy Triskelion, get Triskelion back from the graveyard, attack, remove the counters, deal a lot of damage, just finish him off with a trike. But if that doesn't work, he's got enough alternatives to also win the game. So a super strong deck. I do think this is a favorite because I think Leo is going to ramp up too quickly for Frenk to respond. But I'm hoping for Frenk to show us how the Chains works in a match. I'm so looking forward to that. And of course, Frenk, you have a chance. I'm not saying you have no chance, but I just know how strong the Robots deck is, and I know it's even more powerful in the hands of Leo. So yeah, it's impressive. Anyway, we looked at the deck of Leo, we discussed the deck of Frenk, so that means we're ready. Let's go to round number 3 of the Raging Bull series, Robots versus Chains. Game number 1, here we go. So we've got Frenk on the play. He's sitting on the right side. He's playing with the Chains of Mephistopheles deck. And he is playing against Leo, and he is on the left, and he is playing with his Robots deck. So we're going to see a lot of Triskelions and copy artifacts from his side. And this is quite an interesting opener here by Frenk, starting with a Badlands, Moxjet, and the Wreck. So the Wreck is going to punish Leo if he empties his hand. Let's see if he's going to do that. He's got a copy artifact in hand there, City of Brass. Is that a Time Walk next to it, I believe? It's kind of hard to identify the other cards here. At least it is for me. Could there be a Mox there? He is kind of in the tank, of course. Maybe he didn't expect to see the Wreck. So he's like, okay, what's up with the Wreck? What does he want to do? I believe next to the copy artifact, it's a basic island, by the way. And Leo really in the tank, trying to figure out what he can do. Starting with a basic island, followed up by a Mox Pearl. Okay, so that was a Mox in his hand, playing the 2 for the Time Walk, I assume. Exactly, there's the Time Walk. So he's going to take an extra turn. That means that Frenk can start a sandwich. You know, there's always a silver lining, always in Magic. And let's see what Leo can do. Playing out that City of Brass, he could play out the Time Twister, of course. Oh, he's got a Trike there in hand as well, and that copy artifact. Is that a Mana Vault on the other side of the Trike? Interesting. I wonder if he's going to play the Volt, wait a turn, then play the Trike next turn, if that's going to be his line of play here. Okay, there's the Mana Vault. And I think that's probably going to be it, right? Or is he going to play at the Time Twister? You can kind of see him think here. I mean, next turn he could play the Triskelion using the Mana Vault, but then still he doesn't have enough mana to copy it with the copy artifact. So it is a plan, but it's kind of a slow plan. Now remember, Leo did play the Time Walk in his opening turn, so he's got an extra turn compared to Frenk. Tapping City of Brass, so he's going to do something. He's going to take a damage. Going to go to 19. What is he going to do with that one? Tapping for 4. Oh, he's going to play Demonic Tutor. I didn't see the Demonic Tutor in there. What an opening hand by Leo, by the way. So he started with Time Walk, Time Twister, and Demonic Tutor in his opener. That's insane. And now he's going to shuffle up again. So very spectacular start by Leo. And I mean, if I was Frenk, I would start ordering a couple of beers, you know, because this can take a while. He is enjoying his sandwich, which is, by the way, a broodje croquette. If you're ever in the Netherlands, you need to eat it. Well, you don't need to do anything, but it's a nice thing to eat. There's a Soul Ring. Did he look up a Soul Ring? And then he's got, oh, there he's playing the Time Twister. And then he's shuffling everything back into his library. And Frenk's like, okay, you know, whatever. And this is actually not too bad for Frenk because his hand wasn't great. He really needs the chains. So hopefully he can find that when he draws 7 fresh cards. So both players shuffling up here. Let's see what they're going to draw. So there's a Sage, a Trike, a Sage, Shatter, a Mox, Ruby, Ancestral Recall, and a Felwar Stone. So again, a very good hand here for Leo. Playing out the Felwar. Apparently he still had some mana floating. And now finally passing the turn back. I mean, if Frenk can now cast a Chains of Mephistopheles and a Winds of Change, he's really has a big chance of actually winning this game. There's the Chains, I should say. And of course, Leo's going to read it. And we can see Frenk here, of course, explaining the card as well. So, yeah, basically what it means, if you draw cards outside of your draw step, you basically have to discard a card first. And if you don't have any cards in hand, you've got to mill yourself for one for each card that you're supposed to draw. So if there's a Winds of Change, yes, there's the Winds of Change. This is so cool. I'm so happy to see this. How fantastic is this? I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. And here we're going to see what I talked about in the deck. We're going to see it in action. I'm super excited. So Winds of Change means both players have got to shuffle back their hand into their library and draw that amount of cards. But because of the Mephistopheles, they don't draw the cards. Instead, they just mill themselves. So yeah, that's just pretty exciting. And of course, Leo is trying to comprehend, okay, what is going on? What is happening here? And I think this is a very important moment here for Frenk, because if he wouldn't have been able to do this, he would have lost the game. You know, there was no way he could then come back, because next turn, I'm sure Leo would have started playing his Trikes and copy artifacts. And, you know, remember, he also had an Ancestral Recall in hand and whatnot. So it would have been very lethal. So Frenk really needed this play here with Chains of Mephistopheles and that Winds of Change to kind of, you know, get back into this game. And actually now it's looking really, really good for Frenk. So there we see both players just putting a lot of cards into their graveyard. And now he's just going to pass the turn back here to Leo. And Leo, of course, is going to take damage from the rack now. He's going to take 3 damage. Going to drop to 16. It looks like he's going to untap the Mana Vault. So he's not going to take damage from the Mana Vault. So he's on 16. Just one card for Leo here. Remember, just the card that you draw, you can just keep. Ooh, this is a really good top deck for Leo. Going to drop to 15. Finding that there's Triskelion. This is really good news for him. Frenk drawing his one card. Hopefully it's a Disenchant or a Swords. And Leo there putting his Trike Arms on his Triskelion. And there's the pass turn. So Leo again untapping the Mana Vault, taking 3 damage from the rack. So he's got to go to 12 here. It's kind of a race. There's the attack. Frenk taking his first points of damage, going to go to 16. And there's the pass turn from Leo. Tapping 3 here. Okay, there's a Disrupting Scepter. It's okay, but it's too slow. 2 damage now for Leo because he still has 1 card in hand. So he's going to drop to 10. He can attack again for 4. So he put Frenk on 12. So he's going to drop to 12 here. 2 cards in hand now for Leo. And if he doesn't play anything out, it means next turn he only takes 1 damage. Although, of course, Frenk has that Disrupting Scepter that he can activate. He's probably going to use it now. Using the Disrupting Scepter. Now remember, Leo gets to choose what he wants to discard. Discarding a Mana Vault. Only 1 card in hand there for Frenk. I couldn't see what it was. Leo dropping to 8. But now Frenk is also on 8, taking 4 more points of damage. Frenk is not winning this. He needs to take care of that Trike. Oh, copy artifact on the Triskelion. That is unfortunate. That means that Leo already has 6 points of direct damage. There are some more Trike Arms. Man, this is bad news for Frenk. I mean, it was such a beautiful play to see you have that turn where you had your Chains of Mephistopheles and your Winds of Changes after that Time Twister by Leo. That was just brilliant. And look at it now. He's dealing damage. He's going to put him on 8. No, he's going to play Animate that. Yeah. And then he's going to win it. Yeah, that makes sense. He's going to animate it, then it comes back with the counters again, and he's got enough. And Frenk kind of showing the bolt, but also realizing that that wouldn't be enough. So, yeah, this shows how strong the deck of Leo is. As soon as he manages to just get a Triskelion out, I mean, the game kind of starts of copying, animating, and then you can deal so much damage. Remember, those 3+1/+1 counters equal 3 damage, right? It's like a lightning bolt every single time you manage to copy another Triskelion. So it's very, very brutal. Anyway, both players are going to go into their sideboards. I wonder if Frenk is going to use his transformational sideboard and get some creatures in. Maybe he is, because now in game 1, Leo kind of knows the trick with the chains. So perhaps he's going to board in all his creatures. Curious to see that in game number 2. Game number 2, here we go. And there we see Frenk starting with the wreck and passing turn. Let's see what Leo can do. Can he have another explosive opening like he had in game number 1? He's got a Mana Vault there. An Island, City of Brass. There's a black card. Could be a Demonic Tutor or a Mind Twist. Actually, it could be a lot of things. He's playing multiple black cards, but it kind of looks like perhaps it's a Mind Twist. There's a City of Brass. There's a Mox Ruby. There's a Mana Vault. Tapping or taking a damage. So was that a Mind Twist? Yuck. It was a Mind Twist. Again, a great opening here for Leo, and it just shows how good his deck actually is. Remember, in game number 1, he had a Time Walk to start with, and now he's starting with a Mind Twist. Oh, he's losing his Chains of Mephistopheles and his Winds of Change. So he had all the ingredients in hand to do that cool trick again that we saw him do in game number 1. And this is brutal. He's just passing the turn. Doesn't have any lands to play out or Moxen. We see a Disrupting Scepter in hand. That's not going to help him much right now. This is brutal. This could mean it's going to be a walkover for Leo. Leo, of course, taking 1 point of damage because of the Mana Vault. So he's going to drop to 18. There we see an ATOC and a pass turn. I wonder if we're going to see a bolt here by Frenk kind of forcing Leo to second artifact. No, we're not. He's going to play another wreck and a pass turn. Yeah, this is pretty brutal. I mean, Frenk needs his deck to work on full cylinders to stand a chance against the powerful robots, a tier 1 deck. There we see Leo second the Mana Vault. Therefore, not taking any damage. He's still on 18. Could play out that basic island, play out a Suchi. He also has a copy artifact in hand, so he's got a lot of options. He's probably going to attack for 3, of course, putting Frenk on 17. What he can just do is play Suchi, next turn copy Suchi, you know. I mean, that's also a good strategy. He's going to drop down to 17. There's the attack. We see Frenk going down to 17 as well. There is a Swords to Plowshares and another pass. Cannot find any lands. This is pretty frustrating for Frenk. And actually also for me, because I really enjoy watching decks like Frenk's deck in action, you know. And I want to see them work like in game 1, but unfortunately he's now stranded on 1 Badlands. And it looks like this is going to be a walkover for Leo. So Leo's going to attack for 5, he's going to put him on 12. He can now play his copy artifact on the Suchi. And that means that next turn he can attack probably for lethal already because he can start sacking some artifacts. 2 cards in hand now for Leo. And a pass turn. There he plays a Mishra's Factory. So at least it's a land, but it's not a white land. He needs a white mana to cast that Swords to Plowshares. 1 point of damage here, 2 points of damage actually for Leo because of the double rack. It's going to drop to 13, and look at that. He's found an Ancestral Recall. I think he can play a Recall. If he can find a Mox, he can now kill Frenk. Although that's not true though, because Frenk can of course use his Mishra's Factory to block. So he's attacking with everything, kind of forcing Frenk here to animate his Mishra's factory here. So he's going to animate the factory, try to block, but there's the Shatter in response. He's going to sack, and then he's going to deal, he's going to deal 11 points of damage. Actually, you know, so Frenk, you would have been on 1, but Frank's like, you know what, I've seen enough, you've got this one. So Frenk, unfortunately in game 2, your deck didn't work at all because you just didn't find any lands. There are hardly any decks in old school Magic, in Magic in general, that work without any lands. Anyway, congratulations, Leo, you have won. But for me, the most spectacular moment of the game was this moment where we saw Frenk really demonstrating how good Chains of Mephistopheles can be, especially in combination with the Wreck and Winds of Change. Thank you both for bringing your decks to the table, and thank you for sharing and showing your skills here on Timmy Talks. And of course, congratulations to Leo for winning here in round number 3 of the Raging Bull series. And that was round number 3. Now, if you enjoyed this, please make sure to come back next week, Friday, because then we have round number 4 of the Raging Bull series. And before we go, a big thank you to D for recording these matches with his super camera. You know, it's fantastic quality. I really enjoy looking back at these matches. Also, a big shout out to Richard, the organizer of the Raging Bull series. Thank you so much, man, for commentating this, doing this together, recording these matches, looking back at this. It is just a lot of fun, and I hope you continue organizing this old school Magic event in the capital of the Netherlands, Amsterdam. And what else is there to say to you guys? Oh, before you go, please take a moment to like, share, and comment. All those 3 things really help the channel move forward. And it's just a big help. It's free to do, and it really helps the channel, and it helps me. So thank you very much for that. And if you're new to the channel, please subscribe and don't forget to ring that bell. Okay, and now that's all out of the way, there's one last thing that I'd like to mention. Maybe I should mention it first, actually, now that I think about it, and that is the Timmy Talks Patreon page, because you can also become a patron of the channel, and then you support Timmy Talks financially, and there are some perks there when you do that, because you get access to the Discord server of Timmy Talks, where you can meet all the other patrons and channel members, so that's pretty cool. You can also then participate in all the Timmy Talks events. I organize like little tournaments as a thank you for the people that support the channel financially, so you can join in on those if you join the patron program. And of course, your name will be mentioned in the end scroll. What end scroll? This end scroll.
What shall we do with the drunken sailor? What shall we do with the drunken sailor? What shall we do with the drunken sailor? Early in the morning, way hey and up she rises, way hey and up she rises, way hey and up she rises. Early in the morning, put him in the longboat until he's sober. Put him in the longboat until he's sober. Put him in the longboat until he's sober. Early in the morning, way hey and up she rises, way hey and up she rises, way hey and up she rises. Early in the morning, pull out the plug and wet him all over. Pull out the plug and wet him all over. Pull out the plug and wet him all over. Early in the morning, way hey and up she rises, way hey and up she rises, way hey and up she rises. Early in the morning. What shall we do with the drunken sailor? What shall we do with the drunken sailor? Put him in the scout to the host, my son. Put him in the scout to the host, my son. Put him in the scout to the host, my son. Early in the morning.
Icketus, ficketus, somber, kazee.